I have not done, so to preface this, I have not done VOD reviews in years. And let me explain why I have not done VOD reviews in years. The reasons that I have not done VOD reviews in years is because obviously they are a lot longer version. They're a longer form version of co-streams. They're longer form content, etc. They perform really poorly. Not as many people are interested in them. It doesn't really have any value. These are all like, I'm just giving you guys like reasons, right? Why these types of videos don't really exist anymore. They actually cause harm. And what I mean by that is that they actually cause damage to the channel. They quite literally, yeah, they cause harm, they cause damage in that regard. The only benefit to them is that they basically add like documentation, or they add reference points to certain things because of the amount of detail that they contain, or like stuff like that. Obviously, I used to do a lot of these once upon a time, way back in the day, years ago, and stuff like that. Now, the only reason that I'm deciding to do this is because of the incident on stream earlier today, where, I was just reading so many things on Twitter and reading things in chat and the conversation with Sam, but also like the amount of times that I was just getting so upset with things that were just being said over, I would say, like the last 2 weeks maybe of MSI, about like the meta and drafts and pick ban and all these other types of things. And I just thought, okay, well, T1 legitimately did lose almost every single draft in their last 2 series. Like literally almost every draft they lost. Now, I think that you have to then define like, okay, well, what is a losing draft, right? And I think that to define like what is a losing draft, there's a couple of questions that you have to ask. Who loads into the game with the onus to do something? And then who is more likely to be able to achieve what it is that they're trying to do, given the base state of the champions or the balance of the game? Given the current balance, right? Trying to think very carefully about how I say certain things and stuff so that people can't take things out of context or whatnot. Then, in addition to that, what is actually like practical given the level of the players? And knowing that they are both professional teams playing at a specific level, and assuming that, it's not just going to be a clown fiesta where there's massive kill acceleration, so there's gold inflation happening inside of the game, and champions have a lot of extra gold that they have at certain, break points, or there's different level acceleration because champions just getting hyper fed, etc. Or turrets are falling really rapidly, and there's all this nonsense that's happening super early, right? What is actually happening in like an expected outcome? If you really understand what's going on inside of the lanes, or you understand what pro players can do in 1v1s and 2v2s and like all this other types of stuff, and you understand that pro players, especially with like coordination and stuff, can figure out ways to survive or beat certain things. Now, one of the things that I'll allude to is obvious. Like, look at this, right? Like we're already spending 5 minutes and we're not even starting the first game, right? You look at the Scion thing that started with BDS and then 100 Thieves, and then we saw it in this tournament, and we finally saw an iteration of T1 and Gen G like respond to it that was actually pretty good. But we saw a lot of teams fumble it. We saw a lot of teams actually fumble responses to the Scion invade. And finally, we saw a response to it that was actually pretty good, right? And when you finally see the response to it that's actually pretty good, you can measure that response, and then you can actually determine how practical is the response. Then you can determine if that's actually practical, then this becomes the expected outcome. And if that's the expected outcome, then this is the analysis that we should put forth. And then if that's the case, then this is how we should assess or measure what we predict to happen. The other thing that people have to understand is that a draft win does not mean that you will win the game necessarily. The same way that in a trading card game, for anyone that's played trading card games, if anyone's played Hearthstone, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, etc., you can have a deck that has really, 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 really good matchups. You can have a deck that just steamrolls another deck. And you can get a friend, and you can have them play that deck, and you just play against it, and it just basically feels like it's free. You know, you guys, you shuffle up, you deal, 9 out of 10 times, you just roll that deck over, and it just feels like there's nothing that deck can do. And that is just the matchup. That is the dynamic of those two decks playing against each other. And then you take an entirely different deck, and you use that deck against that deck, and the outcome is totally different, right? This probably leads to like a different video, which goes over archetypes and themes and all these other great things that no one in League of Legends like really talks about, that then circles into draft and all this wonderful, magnificent stuff that no one talks about. And then they cry about meta shifts, and they talk about the meta and figuring out the meta, even though no one's really figuring out the meta, because the meta is never what it actually is. It's always a response to what it's perceived to be, which is ironic in itself, right? That's kind of funny, because the only way that the meta is ever actually the meta is when something is determined to be in violation of the game. That's the only way that it's actually the meta. Meta stands for most efficient tactic available, right? And even if that's not actually what it stands for, I think that it has become what that stands for. Even if that's not originally what it stands for, it's evolved to become what that stands for, because I think that's what the mass majority of people think that's what it stands for. So most efficient tactic available. So the only way that the meta is if something violates the game. An example of something violating the game is if a champion is so oppressive that the things that should beat it can't beat it. Now, things that should beat it would be like theme counters, class counters, these types of things should be able to beat it, can't beat it. Items that, maybe should be really good against it aren't good against it. Just because the champion's base stats or abilities or something are just like way too strong. Now, this is not the case in this current game, right? And obviously throughout the course of MSI, if you've been listening to any of the co-streams, not just mine, you might have heard plenty of different co-streamers and plenty of different pro players on all different co-streams all say different things about different champions. And every single time I get very, very frustrated as a person who has come from various games with multiple different era shifts and, seeing different iterations of strategies and all this other type of stuff change in essentially, patchless games. They're not really patchless because the maps constantly change, within alters timing attacks and windows and all this other types of stuff. And again, different video. But anyways, even in this tournament in itself, right, there's like variations. And anyways, this is kind of a long intro. It's not even really an intro. We're just we're going over why VOD reviews are like kind of weird. And I'm going over why VOD reviews in general are like awkward. Now, obviously, none of the stuff that I'm saying actually matters if the people that you're talking to just accept what you're saying to accept it. However, I don't believe that that's really the case with what's going on with the things that I'm talking about, right? So for me, obviously, we have to like draw and all this other types of stuff, and we have to talk about lots of different things. We have to pull up freeze frames and all this other type of stuff. So for me, I think it's a lot more stressful, and that's very annoying, to be honest. And I mean, there's that, right? So I think that maybe that is an aspect of it which makes it a little bit more tedious, but that's fine. But that also does make VOD reviews a little bit weird, not weirder, but more awkward to do. if again all of the aforementioned things are also accepted to be true. So anyways, bot reviews. All right, so T1 versus BLG. So we already talked about